I kissed another man in front of 300 people, and my husband was standing less than 10 feet away from me. That single moment destroyed everything I thought I knew about myself, about my marriage, and about the woman I believed I was. My name is Sarah, I'm 34 years old, and this is the story of how I became someone I never thought I could be. It was a Thursday evening in downtown Seattle when my entire world shifted on its axis. The rain was coming down in sheets, typical for November in the Pacific Northwest, drumming against the tall windows of the Grand Hyatt Ballroom, where my advertising firm was hosting its annual industry gala. I remember the sound of it, that constant percussion that seemed to underscore every conversation, every clink of champagne glasses, every burst of polite laughter. I'd been married to David for 9 years, together for 12, and until that night, I would have told you with absolute certainty that I knew exactly who I was and what I stood for. The ballroom was magnificent that evening, decorated in silver and deep burgundy, with centerpieces of white roses and eucalyptus on every table. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the crowd of advertising executives, creative directors, and media buyers who gathered for this event every year. I was wearing a navy blue cocktail dress that David had picked out for me 3 weeks earlier, sensible heels that wouldn't kill my feet by the end of the night, and the diamond earrings his mother had given me on our 5th anniversary. Everything about me that evening screamed safe, predictable, appropriate. Everything except what was about to happen. David was across the room, deep in conversation with his colleague Marcus about some project deadline, his phone in his hand as always, probably checking emails even in the middle of a social event. That was David, always working, always networking, always one step ahead in his career as a software engineer at Microsoft. He looked handsome in his charcoal suit, his dark hair slightly graying at the temples in a way that made him look distinguished rather than old. We'd been a good match on paper. College sweethearts from the University of Washington, both ambitious, both from stable middle-class families in the suburbs, both wanting the same things. A house in Queen Anne, eventually kids, a comfortable life. We'd built that life methodically, checking off boxes like items on a grocery list. But somewhere in those 9 years of marriage, I'd started to feel invisible. Not in a dramatic way, not in a way that would justify what I was about to do, but in small, accumulating moments. David would talk over me at dinner parties. He'd forget to ask about my presentations at work. He'd scroll through his phone while I told him about my day. Sex had become a scheduled event, usually on Saturday nights unless he was too tired, efficient, and perfunctory, like another task to complete before sleep. I told myself this was normal, that this was what marriage became after the honeymoon phase, that passion was a luxury for younger people without mortgages and career pressures. If you're listening to this story and recognizing pieces of your own life, I hope you'll take a moment to subscribe to this channel. Your support helps us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers, and it only takes a second to click that subscribe button. This story gets much more complicated, and I need you with me for every twist. The event had been going on for about an hour when I first noticed him. He was standing near the bar, tall and lean with dark hair that was slightly too long for corporate standards, wearing a navy suit that fit him like it had been tailored specifically for his frame. But it wasn't his appearance that caught my attention initially. It was the way he was looking at the room, with this expression of amused detachment, as if he was observing a fascinating social experiment, rather than participating in it. He had a glass of what looked like whiskey in his hand, and he was alone, which was unusual for this kind of networking event, where everyone traveled in packs. I probably would have just noted his presence and moved on, but then our eyes met across the crowded room. It wasn't one of those ridiculous movie moments where time stops and everything goes into soft focus. It was more unsettling than that. He looked at me, really looked at me, with an intensity that made me feel like I was the only person in the entire ballroom. Not in a creepy way, but in a way that made me suddenly aware of my own existence, my own body, my own presence in space. When was the last time David had looked at me like that? When was the last time anyone had? I looked away quickly, feeling my cheeks flush, and took a sip of my wine. I was being ridiculous. I was a married woman at a professional event. I had no business feeling flustered by a stranger's gaze. I turned my attention back to my colleague Jennifer, who was telling me about some disaster with a client presentation, but I found it hard to concentrate. I could still feel him looking at me, and against my better judgment, I glanced back. He was still watching me, and this time he smiled. Not a big, obvious smile, but a small, knowing one that seemed to say he understood exactly what I was feeling. "Sarah, are you even listening to me?" Jennifer's voice cut through my distraction. "Sorry, yes, the presentation. The client hated the mock-ups?" I tried to refocus, but it was useless. "Never mind. I can tell you're somewhere else tonight. Is everything okay?" Jennifer was one of my closest friends at work, and she had that particular gift of being able to read people. "I'm fine. Just tired. Long week." It wasn't a complete lie. It had been a long week, but fatigue wasn't what was making my heart race. Jennifer followed my gaze across the room. "Who's that guy you keep looking at?" "I don't know what you're talking about." I could hear how unconvincing I sounded. "The tall one by the bar who's been staring at you for the past 5 minutes?" "Sarah, he's gorgeous, but you're married." "Where's David?" "Over there, talking to Marcus." I gestured vaguely toward the other side of the room without looking away from the stranger. "Well, maybe you should go stand with your husband instead of flirting with strangers." She was right, of course. I should have walked away right then, should have gone to David's side, should have remembered my vows and my values and the life I'd built. But I didn't. Instead, I excused myself from Jennifer and headed toward the bar, telling myself I just needed another glass of wine, that I wasn't actually going to talk to him, that I was just getting a drink. He was waiting for me. I knew it as surely as I knew my own name. When I approached the bar, he moved slightly to make room, and when I ordered a glass of Pinot Grigio, he spoke for the first time. "I'd recommend the Chardonnay instead. They're serving a bottle from a small winery in Woodinville, much better than what's being passed around on trays." His voice was deep and warm, with just a hint of something I couldn't place. Not quite an accent, but something that suggested he hadn't grown up in Seattle. I should have just thanked him politely and walked away. Instead, I found myself saying, "How do you know about the wine selection?" "I helped plan this event. I'm with the catering company that's running it tonight, Julian Reynolds." He extended his hand, and I took it, feeling the warmth of his palm against mine. "Sarah Matthews. I work for Harrison and Associates, one of the firms attending tonight." "Matthews, that's your married name?" His eyes flicked down to my left hand, where my engagement ring and wedding band caught the light. I should have been offended by the directness of the question, but instead I found myself smiling. "Yes, 9 years. And does Mr. Matthews know that his wife is over here talking to strange men at the bar?" "He's busy with work colleagues, as usual." I don't know why I added that last part. It felt disloyal, but it also felt honest. Before you judge me too harshly, let me ask you to consider subscribing to this channel. Sometimes we need to hear stories about people making mistakes to understand our own lives better. Click that subscribe button and help us grow our community to 1,000 subscribers. Julian ordered the Chardonnay for me, and we moved slightly away from the bar, standing near one of the tall windows that overlooked the rainy Seattle streets below. We talked for what felt like 10 minutes, but must have been closer to 30. He told me he'd grown up in Portland, but had moved to Seattle 5 years ago to start his catering business. He asked me about my work, and when I started to give him the standard elevator pitch about advertising campaigns and brand strategy, he stopped me. "No, I don't want to hear about your job. I want to know what you actually think about it. Do you love it? Does it make you feel alive?" Nobody had asked me a question like that in years. David certainly never had. I found myself telling Julian the truth, that I'd fallen into advertising almost by accident, that sometimes I felt like I was just going through the motions, that I'd once wanted to be a photographer, but had given it up because it seemed impractical. "Why did you stop taking photos?" he asked, and the genuine curiosity in his voice made my chest tighten. "Life, I guess. Career, marriage, responsibilities. There's never enough time." That's what people say when they stop doing the things that matter to them. He wasn't being judgmental, just matter of fact, but his words hit me like a physical blow. We talked about Seattle, about the rain, about his catering business and the challenges of working in the events industry. He was funny and intelligent, but more than that, he was present. He listened when I spoke. He asked follow-up questions. He looked at me like what I was saying actually mattered. It was intoxicating in a way I hadn't experienced in years. "Sarah!" David's voice cut through our conversation. I turned to see my husband approaching, his expression curious rather than suspicious. "I've been looking for you. We should probably start making rounds, saying hello to some of the key people here." "David, this is Julian Reynolds. He's with the catering company. Julian, this is my husband, David." They shook hands, and I watched as David gave Julian the quick assessment that men give other men, sizing him up in seconds. Julian remained calm and friendly, completely unfazed. "The event looks great," David said perfunctorily. "Very professional." Then to me, "Ready?" I should have said yes. I should have taken David's arm and walked away and never thought about Julian again. But something in me rebelled against being pulled away like a child being collected by a parent. Actually, Julian was just telling me about the wine selection. Apparently there's a really interesting Chardonnay from Woodinville that I wanted to try. David looked at his watch. "We can get wine anytime, Sarah. I really think we should network while we're here. You go ahead. I'll catch up with you in a few minutes." I saw the flash of irritation cross David's face, but he was too well-mannered to make a scene. "Fine. Don't be too long." He walked away, already pulling out his phone. "I should probably go," I said to Julian, but I didn't move. "Probably." He was still looking at me with that intense gaze that made me feel like I was the most fascinating person in the room. "This is crazy. I don't do this. I don't talk to strange men at parties. I don't ignore my husband." "Maybe that's the problem." "What do you mean?" "Maybe you've been ignoring yourself for so long that you've forgotten what it feels like to be seen." His words struck something deep inside me, something I'd been trying not to acknowledge for years. Tears suddenly pricked at my eyes, which was mortifying. I was at a professional event, talking to a stranger, on the verge of crying. What was wrong with me? "I'm sorry," I said, blinking rapidly. "I don't know what's happening. I should go find my husband." "Sarah." The way he said my name made me stop. When was the last time someone really looked at you? When was the last time you felt like you mattered? I couldn't answer. My throat had closed up, and if I tried to speak, I knew I would start crying in earnest. "I see you," Julian said softly. "I don't know you, but I see you. And I think you're extraordinary." That was the moment. That was when I should have walked away. Should have returned to David's side. Should have saved myself and my marriage. But I didn't. Instead, I stood there, looking at this man I'd met 20 minutes ago, feeling more alive than I had in years. If this story is resonating with you, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button. We're working hard to build a community here, and every subscription brings us closer to our goal of 1,000 subscribers. Your support means everything. The next hour passed in a blur. I did eventually return to David's side, and we made the rounds as he'd wanted, talking to colleagues and clients, and making the appropriate small talk. But my mind was somewhere else entirely. I kept catching glimpses of Julian across the room, and every time our eyes met, I felt that same jolt of recognition, that same sense of being truly seen. It was addictive and terrifying in equal measure. David didn't seem to notice anything was wrong. He was in his element at these events, working the room with practiced ease, making connections that might benefit his career. I stood beside him, smiling and nodding and saying the right things, but I felt like I was watching myself from outside my body. Who was this woman in the navy dress and sensible heels, playing the role of the perfect corporate wife? When had I become her? And more importantly, when had I stopped being myself? Around 9 o'clock, the event organizers announced that there would be a brief award ceremony. Apparently, several local businesses were being recognized for their contributions to the Seattle business community. I wasn't particularly interested, but David wanted to stay, so we found seats at one of the round tables near the front of the room. Jennifer was already sitting there with her husband, along with a few other colleagues from Harrison and Associates. The lights dimmed slightly, and a woman in a red dress took the stage to begin the presentations. The first few awards were predictable, going to large corporations and well-established businesses. People applauded politely, and the recipients gave brief, forgettable speeches. I was barely paying attention, my mind still replaying my conversation with Julian, when I heard his name. And this year's award for Best New Catering Business goes to Reynolds Events, founded and operated by Julian Reynolds. My head snapped up as Julian walked onto the stage, looking completely comfortable in front of the crowd. He accepted the crystal trophy with a gracious smile and stepped up to the microphone. "Thank you so much for this honor," he began, his voice carrying easily through the ballroom. "When I started this business 5 years ago, I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew that I wanted to create experiences that brought people together, that made ordinary moments feel special." He paused, and his eyes scanned the crowd until they found me. It wasn't obvious, nothing that anyone else would notice, but I felt it like a physical touch. "We spend so much of our lives going through the motions," he continued. "We follow the scripts we're given. We play the roles we're expected to play. And somewhere along the way, we forget to actually live. We forget to take risks, to be vulnerable, to let ourselves be truly seen by another person." I felt David shift beside me, probably wondering when this speech would end so we could leave. He had no idea that every word Julian was saying was meant for me. So my challenge to all of you tonight is this. Tomorrow morning, when you wake up, ask yourself if you're really living or just existing. And if you're just existing, have the courage to change something. Thank you. The applause was enthusiastic, and Julian left the stage. The ceremony continued with a few more awards, but I didn't register any of it. My heart was pounding so hard, I was sure everyone at the table could hear it. David leaned over and whispered, "That was a weird speech. Kind of inappropriate for a business event." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because Julian was right. I had been just existing, following a script, playing a role, and I didn't know if I could keep doing it. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel, because what happens next changed my life completely. Just click that subscribe button below, and you'll be notified when we post new stories. We're so close to reaching 1,000 subscribers, and your support makes all the difference. After the ceremony ended, people began filtering out of the ballroom. It was after 10 o'clock, and the event was winding down. David wanted to leave immediately because he had an early meeting the next morning, and I should have agreed. I should have let him take me home, should have ended this dangerous flirtation before it went any further. But when I saw Julian standing near the exit, talking to some of the event staff, I made a decision that would change everything. "David, you go ahead. I need to use the restroom, and then I'll catch an Uber home. No point in both of us waiting around." He looked at me suspiciously. "Are you sure? I can wait." "No, really. You should go. You have that early meeting. I'll be fine." I could see him calculating whether it was worth arguing. He was tired and wanted to get home. So after a moment, he nodded. "Okay. Don't stay too late." He kissed me on the cheek. a dry, perfunctory kiss that I barely felt, and then he was gone. I stood there for a moment, watching him leave, knowing that I was about to cross a line I couldn't uncross. My phone buzzed in my clutch with a text from Jennifer. "I saw you watching that caterer all night. Be careful, Sarah. I'm serious." I ignored it and walked toward Julian. He saw me coming and dismissed the staff member he'd been talking to. We stood facing each other in the nearly empty ballroom, and I could feel my whole body trembling. "Your husband left?" he asked. "He has an early meeting tomorrow." "And you stayed?" "I stayed." "Why?" It was such a simple question, but the answer was incredibly complicated. Why had I stayed? Because I was lonely? Because I felt invisible in my own marriage? Because this stranger had made me feel more alive in an hour than my husband had in years? All of those things were true, but they didn't excuse what I was about to do. "I don't know," I finally said. "I just know that if I leave right now, I'll regret it." "Sarah, I need you to understand something." Julian took a step closer, and I could smell his cologne, something woody and expensive. "I'm not a good guy. I'm not going to tell you to go home to your husband and work on your marriage. I'm not going to be the voice of reason here." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to ask you to come have a drink with me at the bar across the street. And if you say yes, we both know it won't stop there. My whole life, I'd been the good girl. I'd followed the rules, met expectations, made safe choices. I'd never cheated on a test, never stolen anything, never done drugs, never betrayed anyone's trust. I'd married my college boyfriend, bought a house in a nice neighborhood, built a respectable career. I'd been responsible and reliable and predictable. And in that moment, standing in that ballroom with the rain hammering against the windows, and this beautiful stranger offering me something dangerous and exciting, I realized I was suffocating. "Okay," I heard myself say. "Let's get a drink." If you're still with me, thank you for listening. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. These stories take time and effort to create, and your subscription helps us continue making content. We're building a community here, and we'd love for you to be part of it. Just click that button below. We went to a small bar called The Nest, tucked into a building just a block from the hotel. It was the kind of place that was dimly lit and intimate, with exposed brick walls and vintage whiskey advertisements framed on the walls. It was mostly empty at that hour on a Thursday night, just a few other patrons scattered at the bar and in the dark booths. We found a corner table, and Julian ordered a whiskey while I stuck with wine, though my hands were shaking too badly to hold the glass steady. "You can still leave," Julian said. "I'll think no less of you. In fact, I'll think more of you." "Why are you saying that?" "Because I need you to know that you have a choice. I want you to be here, Sarah, but only if you really want to be here. I want to be here." It was the truth. God help me. It was the absolute truth. We talked for another hour, and this time the conversation went deeper. He told me about his failed engagement 3 years ago, about a woman who had left him for someone wealthier and more stable. He told me about starting his business from nothing, working 80-hour weeks, risking everything on a dream. He told me about his relationship with his mother, who had died 2 years ago from cancer, and how he still sometimes forgot she was gone and would pick up the phone to call her. I told him things I'd never told anyone, about how I'd gotten pregnant during my 2nd year of marriage and had miscarried at 12 weeks, about how David had taken me to the hospital and then gone back to work the same day, telling me it was probably for the best anyway since we weren't really ready for kids, about how that moment had broken something inside me that never quite healed, about how I'd wanted to try again, to go to therapy together, to really grieve together. But David had just moved on like nothing had happened. "I'm so sorry," Julian said, and there were tears in his eyes. "You deserved better than that. You deserved someone who would hold you and grieve with you and acknowledge that you'd lost something real. Nobody had ever said that to me. Not my mother, not my friends, not my husband. I had carried that loss alone for 7 years, and now this stranger was giving me permission to acknowledge it, to feel it, to let it matter. I started crying then, really crying, not caring that we were in public, or that my makeup was probably running, or that I looked like a mess. Julian moved to sit beside me in the booth, and he put his arm around me and let me cry into his shoulder. He didn't try to shush me or tell me it would be okay. He just held me and let me fall apart. When I finally stopped crying, I pulled back and looked at him. His shirt was damp from my tears, and I laughed shakily. "I'm sorry. This is not how I imagined this evening going." "How did you imagine it going?" "I don't know. I've never done this before. I've never even thought about doing this before." "Sarah." He turned to face me fully, taking my hands in his. "I need to tell you something. I noticed you the second you walked into that ballroom tonight. Before you even got your coat checked, before you found your colleagues, I saw you. And I know this sounds crazy because we just met, but I felt something. I felt like I'd been waiting for you." It should have sounded like a line. It should have set off every alarm bell in my head. But the way he was looking at me, with such raw honesty and vulnerability, I believed him. "I felt it too," I whispered. When our eyes met across the room, I felt it. He leaned in slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away, to remember my marriage, to be the good girl I'd always been. But I didn't pull away. I leaned in too. And when our lips met, it was like coming home and jumping off a cliff at the same time. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, as if we were both afraid of the intensity of what we were feeling. But then, something broke open inside me, and I kissed him back with all the passion and longing and desperation I'd been suppressing for years. We pulled apart, both breathing hard, and I realized that the few other patrons in the bar were studiously ignoring us, and the bartender was politely looking away. But I didn't care. In that moment, I didn't care about anything except the feeling of being alive, of being wanted, of being seen. "Come home with me," Julian said. It wasn't a demand, it was an invitation, and we both knew what it meant. I should have said no. I should have gone home to my husband and my safe, predictable life, but I had spent 9 years being invisible, and I was done. "Yes," I said. "Please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. I know this story is difficult to hear, but sometimes we need to understand the complexity of human choices. Click that subscribe button and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Your support means we can keep sharing these real, raw stories." We left the bar and walked through the rain to Julian's apartment, which was just 3 blocks away in a renovated building that had once been a warehouse. We didn't talk during the walk, both of us understanding that words would only complicate what was about to happen. His apartment was on the 4th floor, a loft-style space with high ceilings and large windows that overlooked the city. It was decorated with an artist's eye, eclectic furniture, and interesting artwork, and plants everywhere. It was the kind of space that felt lived in and loved, so different from the sterile perfection of the house I shared with David. Julian poured us both glasses of water, and we stood in his kitchen, the tension between us almost unbearable. "I need you to be sure," he said, "because once this happens, we can't undo it." I was sure. I had never been more sure of anything in my life, which was terrifying because it meant I had become someone I never thought I would be. But I was tired of being good. I was tired of being invisible. I was tired of living a half-life where I went through the motions and pretended to be happy. What happened next was beautiful and terrible and completely selfish. I won't give you explicit details because that's not what this story is about. But I will tell you that Julian made love to me like I mattered. He touched me like every part of me was precious. He looked at me the entire time like he couldn't believe I was real. And for those few hours in his apartment, I felt more like myself than I had in a decade. Afterward, we lay in his bed, and I stared at the ceiling, reality beginning to creep back in. What had I done? I had betrayed my husband, violated my vows, become an adulterer. The weight of it was crushing, but beneath the guilt was something else, a fierce, defiant joy. I had chosen myself, even if just for one night. I had chosen to feel something real, even if it meant destroying everything else. "What are you thinking?" Julian asked, his fingers tracing patterns on my shoulder. "I'm thinking that I'm a terrible person." "You're not a terrible person. You're a person who's been slowly dying inside a marriage that doesn't feed your soul." "That doesn't excuse what I just did." "No, it doesn't. But it explains it." He turned to face me. "Sarah, I don't know what happens now. I don't know if this was a one-time thing or the beginning of something else. But I need you to know that tonight mattered to me. You matter to me." I wanted to believe him, but I also knew that I barely knew this man. We'd had a few intense hours together, but that didn't constitute a relationship. And even if it did, what future could we possibly have? I was married. I had a life, a career, a home. I couldn't just blow everything up for a stranger, no matter how much he made me feel. "I need to go home," I said, sitting up and looking for my clothes. "It's 3 a.m. "I know, but I can't stay here. David will be suspicious if I'm not home by morning." Julian didn't try to stop me. He helped me find my things, called me an Uber, and walked me down to wait for it. Before I got in the car, he kissed me one more time, and I let myself sink into it, memorizing the feeling. "Will I see you again?" he asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I need to figure out what I'm doing with my life." "Fair enough. But Sarah, whatever you decide, don't go back to just existing. You're too extraordinary for that." The Uber ride home felt like traveling between two different worlds. Julian's world of passion and authenticity and risk, and David's world of safety and predictability and slow suffocation. I didn't know which world I belonged in anymore. Maybe neither. Maybe I needed to create a third option entirely. If you're invested in this story and want to know what happened next, please subscribe to the channel. We're working toward 1,000 subscribers, and every subscription helps. Click that button and join our community. I got home at 3:45 in the morning. The house was dark and quiet, and I could hear David snoring from our bedroom upstairs. I stood in the entryway, still wearing my coat and heels, and looked around at the home we'd built together. Everything was tasteful and coordinated, chosen carefully to project success and stability. But nothing in it reflected who I actually was. There were no photographs on the walls because I'd given up photography. There were no bold colors because David preferred neutrals. There were no personal touches because we'd been too busy building careers to build a life. I went upstairs quietly, peeled off my clothes, and got into the shower. I stood under the hot water for a long time, washing away the physical evidence of what I'd done, but knowing I could never wash away the memory. I had crossed a line tonight, and there was no going back. The question was what I was going to do about it. When I finally got into bed beside David, he stirred slightly, but didn't wake up. I lay there in the darkness, listening to his breathing, and I felt nothing. No love, no guilt, no connection, just emptiness. That's when I knew that my marriage had been over long before I met Julian. I had just been too afraid to admit it. The next morning, David woke me up at 7 o'clock. "Hey, you got in really late last night. What time was it?" I could have lied, should have lied, but I was so tired of lying, even by omission. Around 4, I stayed and had drinks with some colleagues. Until 4 in the morning, on a Thursday? He didn't sound angry, just confused. Yeah, We got to talking, and I lost track of time. He accepted this explanation without question, because it had never occurred to him that I might be capable of infidelity. I was reliable, predictable Sarah. I didn't stay out until 4 a.m. I didn't drink too much. I certainly didn't sleep with strange men. Well, you must be exhausted. I'm heading into the office. Will you be home for dinner? Probably. I'll text you later. He kissed me on the forehead and left, and I lay there feeling like the worst person in the world. Not because I'd cheated, but because I'd realized I didn't want to fix my marriage. I wanted out. Over the next few days, I tried to fall back into my normal routine. I went to work, had meetings, reviewed campaigns, acted like everything was fine. But I felt like I was moving through water, every action requiring enormous effort. Jennifer cornered me on Monday morning in the break room. You look terrible. What happened after the gala? And don't lie to me, Sarah. I know you. I considered lying, but what was the point? I did something really stupid. How stupid are we talking? Cheated on my husband, stupid. Jennifer's eyes went wide. With the caterer? Are you insane? You could lose everything. I know, but Jen, I felt something. For the first time in years, I felt alive. Feeling alive isn't worth destroying your marriage over. You and David have been together forever. You can't throw that away for some random guy you just met. What if David and I have been over for a long time, and I've just been too scared to admit it? She didn't have an answer for that. Neither did I. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel. This story is about to take some unexpected turns, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Just click that subscribe button below and help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. I didn't hear from Julian for 3 days, and I told myself that was for the best. What had happened between us was a mistake, a moment of temporary insanity, and the best thing for everyone would be if we never saw each other again. But on Tuesday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Julian. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I can't stop thinking about you. Can we talk? I should have deleted it. Should have blocked the number. Should have protected my marriage and my reputation and my comfortable life. But my fingers seem to have a will of their own. Yes. When? Tonight? There's a coffee shop on Capitol Hill. Common Grounds. 7 o'clock? I agreed, before I could talk myself out of it. I told David I had to work late on a pitch presentation, and he barely looked up from his laptop when I left the house. Julian was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee in front of him. He looked tired, like he hadn't been sleeping well either. When he saw me, his face lit up in a way that made my heart ache. Thank you for coming, he said as I sat down. I almost didn't, but you did. He pushed one of the coffees toward me. I remembered you took it with just a little cream. The fact that he'd remembered such a small detail made me want to cry. David couldn't remember how I took my coffee, and we'd been married for 9 years. Julian, I don't know what I'm doing here. What happened between us was wrong. I'm married. I know. And I'm not trying to be a home wrecker or convince you to leave your husband. But I needed to see you one more time. I needed to know if what I felt that night was real, or just some fantasy I built up in my head. And sitting here looking at you right now, I know it was real. Sarah, I know this is complicated and messy and probably impossible, but I'm falling for you. I've been thinking about you constantly. The way you laugh, the way you get this little wrinkle between your eyebrows when you're thinking hard about something, the way you talked about photography like it was a lost love. Please don't say these things. You're making this so much harder. Harder than what? Harder than going back to a marriage where you're invisible. Harder than living a life that's slowly killing your spirit? He was right, and I hated him for it. I hated that this stranger could see the truth of my life so clearly when I'd been denying it for years. Even if I wanted to leave David, which I'm not saying I do, I can't just blow up my entire life for someone I barely know. That's crazy. You're right. It is crazy. So let's get to know each other. No pressure, no expectations. Just spend time with me. Let me take you to dinner, or for a walk, or to a museum. Let me show you who I am beyond one intense night. And what about my husband? I'm not going to lie to you and say I care about your husband's feelings. I don't. From what you've told me, he stopped caring about your feelings a long time ago. But I care about your feelings. So this has to be your choice, Sarah. I'm not going to chase you or pressure you. But I'm here if you want me. I sat there looking at this man who was offering me something I hadn't even known I wanted until now. A chance to be truly seen, truly valued, truly myself. It was terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. One dinner, I heard myself say. But somewhere outside of Seattle. Somewhere we won't run into anyone we know. He smiled, and it was like the sun coming out. Tomorrow night, there's a restaurant in Tacoma I love. Amazing Italian food, very quiet and intimate. I agreed, and as I left the coffee shop, I knew I was making a choice that would change everything. I was choosing to keep seeing Julian, to explore whatever this was between us, to actively pursue something that could only end in pain for everyone involved. But I was also choosing myself for the first time in years, and that felt too important to ignore. Subscribe to our channel if you're still with me. These stories of real human complexity need to be told, and your support helps us continue. Just click that subscribe button and help us grow to 1,000 subscribers. The dinner in Tacoma was supposed to be just one evening, just one more chance to see if what we felt was real. But one dinner became 2, then 3, then a standing weekly date that I told David was a networking dinner with clients. I became an expert liar, crafting elaborate stories about work events and late meetings and weekend workshops. David never questioned any of it because it had never occurred to him to question me. I was dependable, Sarah, and dependable people don't lie. Over the next 2 months, I fell in love with Julian in a way I'd never loved David. With David, our relationship had been comfortable and easy, more of a partnership than a passion. With Julian, everything was intense and alive and real. He took me to poetry readings and art galleries. He cooked for me in his apartment, elaborate meals that he'd learned from his Italian grandmother. He listened when I talked about my dreams and fears and regrets. He encouraged me to start taking photographs again. And I did, carrying my old camera everywhere and rediscovering a part of myself I thought was dead. But the guilt was eating me alive. Every time I kissed Julian, I saw David's trusting face. Every time I lied about where I was going, I felt like I was becoming someone I didn't recognize. I knew I needed to make a choice. I couldn't keep living this double life forever. Either I had to end things with Julian and try to save my marriage, or I had to leave David and face the consequences of my choices. The decision was made for me in the worst possible way. It was mid-January, a cold Saturday afternoon, and I'd told David I was meeting Jennifer for lunch and shopping. Instead, I was at Julian's apartment, and we were cooking together, laughing about some ridiculous story he was telling about a catering disaster. I didn't hear my phone ringing in my purse. I didn't see the multiple texts from David. I was too wrapped up in the moment, in the feeling of being happy and alive. When I finally checked my phone 2 hours later, I saw 15 missed calls from David and a string of increasingly frantic texts. The last one said, "Where are you? Jennifer just called the house looking for you. Said you were supposed to meet her 2 hours ago but never showed up. I'm worried. Call me immediately." My blood went cold. I'd forgotten about my lunch plans with Jennifer. I'd been so focused on seeing Julian that I'd completely forgotten the lie I'd told David. And now my cover story had fallen apart. "What's wrong?" Julian asked, seeing my face. I messed up. I told David I was meeting Jennifer, but I forgot I'd actually made plans with her for next weekend. She called him looking for me. What are you going to tell him? I don't know. I don't know. I was pacing his apartment, my heart racing. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep lying to him. Then don't. Tell him the truth. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. You're unhappy. You've been unhappy for years. You've met someone else who makes you happy. Those are the facts. Everything else is just fear. He was right, but that didn't make it any easier. I called David back, and he answered on the first ring. Sarah, where the hell are you? Jennifer said you guys were supposed to meet for lunch, but you never showed up. I've been calling you for 2 hours. I'm so sorry. I got confused about the dates. We're supposed to meet next Saturday, not today. So where are you now? I could have lied again. Could have said I was shopping alone, or at a coffee shop, or anywhere else. But I was so tired of lying. I'm with someone, a friend. I'm sorry I worried you. What friend? Why didn't you answer your phone? David, can we talk about this when I get home? I promise I'll explain everything. There was a long pause. Are you having an affair? The question hung in the air between us, and I realized I couldn't lie anymore. I just couldn't. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, I am. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Then, come home. Right now. We need to talk. He hung up before I could respond. I stood there holding my phone, feeling like I might throw up. Julian came and put his arms around me, but I pushed him away. I need to go. I need to face this. Do you want me to come with you? No. This is something I have to do alone. Before you find out what happened when I got home, please remember to subscribe to this channel. We're so close to our goal of 1,000 subscribers, and your support makes all the difference. Click that subscribe button below. The drive home from Julian's apartment felt like traveling to my own execution. I kept rehearsing what I would say to David, but nothing sounded right. How do you tell someone you've been lying to them for months? How do you explain that you fell in love with someone else? How do you admit that the life you built together no longer feels like enough? David was waiting for me in the living room when I got home. He was sitting on the couch, still and silent. And when he looked at me, I saw something I'd never seen before. Devastation. It was one thing to be unhappy in a marriage, to feel disconnected and invisible. It was another thing entirely to see the pain you'd caused reflected in someone else's eyes. How long? He asked. His voice was flat, emotionless, which was somehow worse than if he'd been yelling. 2 months, since the gala in November. The caterer, the one you were talking to that night. Yes. I knew something was different about you that night. You looked happy, more alive than I'd seen you in years. I thought it was because of the event, or maybe because you'd had a few drinks. I never imagined. He trailed off, shaking his head. David, I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen. But it did happen. You chose to make it happen. Every time you lied to me, every time you went to see him, every time you kissed him, you made a choice. He was right, and I couldn't argue with him. I had made those choices, and now I had to live with the consequences. Why? He asked, and his voice cracked. Why wasn't I enough? What did I do wrong? That was the hardest question to answer because the truth was he hadn't done anything dramatically wrong. He hadn't hit me or cheated on me or gambled away our savings. He'd just stopped seeing me. He'd stopped being curious about me. He'd stopped trying. You didn't do anything wrong, I said carefully. We both stopped trying. We both let the marriage become something hollow and empty. We became roommates instead of partners. So your solution was to have an affair instead of talking to me about it? Instead of suggesting counseling or trying to fix things? Would you have listened if I'd tried to talk to you? When was the last time you really listened to me, David? When was the last time you asked me about my day and actually cared about the answer? When was the last time you looked at me, really looked at me? That's not fair. I've been working hard to provide for us, to build our future. I know you have, but somewhere along the way, we forgot that a future doesn't mean anything if we're miserable in the present. We talked for hours that night, going in circles, crying, accusing, defending. David wanted to know every detail about Julian, and I gave him what I could without being cruel. He wanted to know if I loved Julian, and I told him the truth. I thought I did. He wanted to know if I wanted a divorce, and I told him I didn't know yet, but I thought maybe I did. The hardest part was when he asked me if there was any chance I would choose him, choose our marriage, choose the life we'd built. I wanted to lie and tell him yes, to give him some hope to hold on to. But I'd lied enough. I don't think so, I said quietly. I think we've been over for a long time and neither of us wanted to admit it. He cried then, really cried, and it broke my heart. Whatever had gone wrong between us, I had loved him once. He had been my first serious boyfriend, my first love, my first everything, and I was destroying him. I need you to leave, he finally said. I can't be in this house with you right now. Pack a bag and go stay with Julian or Jennifer or whoever. Just go. I packed a bag with shaking hands and left our home, probably for the last time. I didn't go to Julian's. I couldn't face him yet, couldn't process what had just happened. Instead, I checked into a hotel near downtown and sat in the generic, impersonal room and finally let myself fall apart. Please subscribe to this channel if you want to hear how this story ends. We're building a community of people who understand that life is complicated and messy and doesn't always have easy answers. Click that subscribe button and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. The next few weeks were a blur of difficult conversations and painful decisions. David wanted to try counseling, to see if we could save the marriage. But I knew in my heart that it was over. I'd already checked out emotionally, and no amount of therapy was going to change that. We agreed to a separation, and I moved into a small apartment in Capitol Hill, taking only what I needed and leaving the rest. The divorce process was civil, but painful. David was hurt and angry, and he had every right to be. Our families were shocked and disappointed. My mother kept asking me how I could throw away 9 years of marriage for some man I barely knew. My father stopped speaking to me for 2 months. David's family, who I'd been close to, cut me off completely. Friends took sides, and most of them chose David because I was obviously the villain in this story. Work became awkward too. People had heard about the separation, and while no one said anything directly, I could feel their judgment. I was the woman who'd cheated on her husband. I was the one who'd blown up her marriage. I was the bad guy. The only person who didn't judge me was Julian. He was there through all of it, patient and supportive, giving me space when I needed it and holding me when I fell apart. But even that relationship was complicated now. What had started as an affair had to transform into something real, something that could survive in daylight. And I wasn't sure we could make that transition. "Do you regret it?" Julian asked me one night, about 6 weeks after I'd left David. We were in his apartment, and I was sorting through boxes of my things, trying to figure out how to build a new life from scratch. Regret what? Meeting you? Leaving David? All of it? Any of it. I thought about it carefully. I regret hurting David the way I did. I wish I'd been brave enough to end my marriage before starting something with you. But do I regret meeting you? Do I regret discovering that I could feel this way about someone? No, I don't regret that. Do you love me? It was the first time he'd asked directly, and I knew the answer mattered. Yes, I love you. But I'm also terrified that we're only working because we were forbidden. What if now that I'm free, we discover we don't actually work in the real world? Then we figure it out. Sarah, I'm not asking you to move in with me or marry me or make any huge commitments. I'm just asking you to give us a real chance. No sneaking around, no lies. Just us figuring out if this is real." It sounded so simple when he said it like that. But nothing about the situation was simple. I'd blown up my entire life for this man, and now I had to figure out if it had been worth it. The divorce was finalized in August, almost exactly 9 months after I'd met Julian at that gala. David got the house because I couldn't stand to live there anymore. We split our assets evenly, and he was fair about everything, even though he had every reason not to be. His final words to me, spoken through his lawyer, were that he hoped I'd find whatever it was I was looking for, and that he hoped it was worth what I'd given up. I think about those words a lot. Was it worth it? I gave up a stable marriage, a beautiful home, the respect of my family and friends, my reputation. I became a cautionary tale, the woman who threw everything away for passion. And for what? If you want to know what I learned from all of this, please subscribe to the channel. We're so close to reaching 1,000 subscribers, and every subscription helps. Just click that button below. Julian and I dated for another 6 months after my divorce was final. We tried to make it work, tried to transition from affair to real relationship. And there were beautiful moments. He continued to see me, to value me, to encourage me to pursue my photography. I started freelancing as a photographer, specializing in portraits, and slowly began to build a new career doing something I actually loved. Julian supported me completely, promoting my work through his catering business and introducing me to potential clients. But there were also difficult moments. The reality of being together all the time was different from stolen hours and secret meetings. We fought about money, about future plans, about whether I was ready for a serious relationship, or if I needed time to be single and figure out who I was outside of marriage. We fought about the guilt I still carried over how I'd treated David. We fought about whether what we had was strong enough to survive once the initial intensity wore off. In February, almost 15 months after we met, we decided to take a break. It wasn't a dramatic breakup, just a mutual acknowledgement that maybe we'd moved too fast, that maybe I needed to spend some time alone and figure out who I was as an independent person. We agreed to revisit things in a few months and see if we still wanted the same things. That was 8 months ago. Julian and I are friendly now, but we're not together. I see him occasionally at industry events, and it's always slightly painful and slightly wonderful at the same time. He's dating someone new, a chef he met through his business, and from what I can tell, they're happy together. I'm genuinely glad for him, even though part of me will always wonder what might have been if we'd met at a different time under different circumstances. As for David, I heard through mutual friends that he's engaged to someone he met at work, a software developer who apparently adores him. They're getting married next spring. I hope he's happy. I hope she sees him in ways I stopped seeing him. I hope he's learned to be more present, more attentive, more emotionally available. And if I'm honest, I hope he's learned those lessons in a way he never did with me. So was it worth it? Did I make the right choice when I kissed Julian in that bar, when I went to his apartment, when I chose passion over stability? The truth is, I don't know. I destroyed my marriage and hurt someone who didn't deserve to be hurt. I damaged relationships with family and friends. I became someone I swore I'd never be. But I also woke up. I stopped sleepwalking through my life. I rediscovered parts of myself I thought were gone forever. I learned that I was capable of passion and risk, and choosing myself even when it was terrifying. I'm 36 now, living alone in a small but bright apartment, making my living as a photographer, navigating the complicated landscape of being single again after 12 years with the same person. Some days I'm lonely. Some days I wonder if I made a terrible mistake. But most days, I feel alive in a way I never did before. I feel like I'm actually living my life instead of just going through the motions. I think about that night at the gala a lot. About the moment when Julian looked at me across the room and I felt seen for the first time in years. I think about the choice I made to stay, to have that drink, to cross that line. And while I can't say I'm proud of how I handled things, I also can't say I wish I'd done it differently. Because that moment of connection, that experience of being truly seen and valued and desired, it woke me up to what was missing in my life. It forced me to confront truths I'd been avoiding for years. Maybe that's what affairs really are sometimes, not about the other person at all, but about waking up to what's missing in ourselves and our relationships. Maybe Julian wasn't the answer, but rather the question, the catalyst that forced me to ask myself if I was really living or just existing. I don't have easy answers for you. I can't tell you whether you should stay in an unhappy marriage or leave. I can't tell you whether passion is worth more than stability. I can't tell you whether following your heart is brave or selfish. What I can tell you is that life is short and precious, and spending it being invisible to the person who promised to love you is a kind of slow death. If you're in a marriage where you feel unseen, start with honesty. Talk to your partner. Try therapy. Do the hard work of reconnecting. Don't do what I did and find a temporary solution to a permanent problem. Because affairs don't fix broken marriages, they just blow them up, and everyone gets hurt in the explosion. But also, don't stay in something that's killing your spirit just because you're afraid of change. Don't waste years of your life going through the motions. Don't forget that you matter, that your happiness matters, that your dreams and desires and needs are valid. There's a middle ground between my story and staying forever in something that makes you miserable. If you've stayed with me through this entire story, thank you. Thank you for not judging me, for trying to understand the complexity of human choices, for recognizing that real life is messy and complicated and rarely fits into neat moral categories. If you found value in hearing my story, please subscribe to this channel. We're working hard to build a community where people can share their real, complicated truths without fear of judgment. Your subscription helps us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers and continue creating this content. As for me, I'm still figuring things out. I'm dating sometimes, though nothing serious. I'm building my photography business and slowly rebuilding relationships with family members who are willing to forgive me. I'm learning to live with the consequences of my choices while also refusing to be defined by my worst moment. I'm working on becoming someone who can hold both truths simultaneously, that I hurt people, and that I needed to save myself. Some nights I still think about Julian, about that feeling of being truly seen. And some nights I think about David, about the life we had and whether it could have been saved if I'd tried harder. But most nights, I think about myself and the journey I'm on to become someone I can be proud of, someone who makes better choices, someone who's brave enough to live authentically without destroying others in the process. That's my story. I saw someone who saw me, who heard me, who desired me, and in that moment of connection, I forgot I was married. But more than that, I forgot who I'd become in that marriage, someone invisible and diminished and slowly fading away. Julian didn't save me, and leaving David didn't save me either. What saved me was finally waking up and choosing to matter in my own life. I hope that wherever you are in your journey, you choose yourself too. Not in a selfish, destructive way, but in a way that honors both your needs and your values. Life is too short to spend it being invisible, even to yourself. Thank you for listening, and please don't forget to click that subscribe button and join our community. Your support means everything, and together we're building something meaningful here.